Hello, Reddit. It's been a week since the tsunami struck my village. I've been stuck on the roof of my apartment building ever since it hit. I have no food, minuscule amounts of water, and things are getting pretty desperate. Local emergency services are not responding to my calls, but my Wi-Fi seems to be working well enough, and there's a portable battery here to recharge my phone for a little while. I don't think I stand any chance of getting rescued, but I thought I can at least share my story before I die. Like I said, it all started a week ago. I was a young man living in a middle-sized village right on the coast of Asia. I don't want to mention my name, in case whoever may be behind this wretched event uses it to find and harm my relatives, who all live elsewhere. And I'll keep the town and country anonymous for similar reasons. It could be possible the government of my country I'm in may be the cause of this, so I don't want to do anything that warrants censorship. It's likely you've never heard of the place anyways. It won't be around for much longer. I lived in the only apartment building in town, around 6 stories high. It was the sole skyscraper, so to speak, in the village, with every other building barely achieving 2 stories, with the exception of the town hall and 1 or 2 other buildings. I lived on the 5th floor, on my own. My immediate family lived close to the coast, in a rather large but bare 2-story residence that they shared with another family. I was the only educated member of my family, even if it was only with basic medical skills. Nevertheless, it got me a decent job as a doctor in my little town. I was paid relatively little, but in my poor city, a little money goes a very long way. Most of the townspeople had even less, and struggled for basic necessities. I considered myself lucky. My actual apartment was a small 1-bedroom, but relatively clean and with actual decent furniture, and even a television. By Western standards, it was scrawny, but compared to the rest of the town, I and the handful of other people who lived in the apartment lived like kings. The apartment complex itself was in the center of town, where the town's wealthiest residents resided. This was because the building was the newest building in our little city. One of the very few that was actually hooked up to electricity. My neighbors consisted mostly of government officials and bureaucrats, with only a tiny percentage of professional workers like me. Anyways, I lived a simple yet satisfying life. Until the day the sirens sounded. I was walking back to my apartment at around 5 in the morning after a house call, fingering the few crumpled bills that I'd gotten from the job. Despite managing to acquire a working car, another rarity in this town, I preferred to walk as much as I can, enjoying the balmy breezes of the ocean and watching the palm trees sway pleasantly, enjoying the overall hustle and bustle of life in a small village. Since it was a late hour, the town was quiet. The windows shuttered and dark, a dull sense of tranquility echoing among the empty streets. Then, suddenly, the tranquil, peaceful night was pierced by the ear-splitting wail of a tsunami siren. I was absolutely stunned for almost an entire minute. The siren? Now? For a second, I thought it was just a drill. Except I had heard absolutely nothing pertaining to a drill while chatting with my neighbours in the local government. A tsunami drill would definitely be something they'd have brought up in conversation. Then that would mean I broke into a run, sprinting to the apartment building. There was no time for anything else. The nearest high ground was about 5 miles inland. I'd never make it. I covered my ears as I hurriedly typed in the combination lock outside our building, bolting up the stairs. Panic filled my mind as I dashed up. Would this building even be safe? I could hear the screeching of the siren, even inside the stairwell. The lights flickered on as people stumbled outside their apartments, struggling to shake off sleep. Most of them seemed dazed, like they thought this was all a dream. 1 or 2 of the kids began to cry, and their cries, along with the dogs barking, drowned out the siren blaring outside. I potentially had only minutes to spare. I reached my apartment and fumbled with the lock, tearing inside and grabbing a few essentials into a duffel bag. I was somewhat prepared, being an organised sort of person. Some basic food, water and clothes, my phone, my laptop, and a small power generator, and I was back out in about a minute and a half. I then stormed up to the flat roof, along with a few other startled, shaking neighbours, dragging my few belongings with me. My 5th floor apartment was probably safe, but I didn't want to take any chances. On top of the roof, I placed my belongings in a corner, and I stared up at the night sky. Pristine, full of bright, shining stars, and a full moon. Down in the streets below, lights from candles and lamps began to flicker on. A trickle of people scurrying into the streets and travelling inland. The loud bellowing of the siren tore through the otherwise peaceful night, shouting its warning from its position on top of City Hall. Now, all there was to do was wait. I had actually lived through a tsunami before. A small one, and had plenty of scares. I was to stay on that roof until there was an all-clear signal. I stared out towards the ocean, watching the shoreline with a mix of dread and excitement, casting glances to the people fleeing below. Due to the combination lock, they would not be able to access our apartment, which meant that if there truly was a large tsunami, they would almost certainly be doomed. I prayed that that wouldn't be the case. Well, there was nothing I could do. So I waited, and waited, and waited. For what felt like several hours, nothing happened. At one point, I thought I saw a ripple move across the water's surface, but that amounted to absolutely nothing, and I dismissed it as my imagination. It was deathly quiet, save for the wail of the siren. Despite the lack of a wave, it continued its shrill warning. My next-door neighbour and his best friend, I'll call him Juan, plopped down next to me. He was an administrator in the government, some kind of generic bureaucrat. Something to do with tax analyzation or something like that. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked him quizzically. If this was a drill, he would know about it. "I have absolutely no idea," he responded, looking down towards the ground. No, it's not a drill. I can tell you that. I didn't ask any more questions. We both stared at the ocean for what felt like several more hours, beginning to grow bored. Suddenly, I was jolted out of my dazed state of boredom by one who was tugging at my sleeve. "Hey," he stammered, pointing down at the ground. "Where did everyone go?" I looked down at the ground. It was deathly quiet, with not a single soul in sight. Every single light in the village had been extinguished also, leaving behind a blanket of darkness. A horrid still lingered in the air, the sole noise being that of the siren, which still blared louder than an opera star. I was utterly confused. It seemed like moments ago, the streets were bustling with panicked townspeople and frightened animals. Though maybe I just lost track of time. Maybe they all just evacuated. Yet, there was a horrid feeling rising in my gut. Something just felt off. The town felt empty, devoid of life. Worse than that, it reeked of death somehow, despite nothing being visibly wrong. A murmur kicked up among those of us gathered onto the roof, most of whom hadn't noticed the disturbing silence. Was it a false alarm? Should they head down? Should they stay? I highly recommended staying. In actual drills, we were ordered to stay put until the siren stops and gives the all clear. Right now it was still crying out in full swing. Besides, I just didn't like the look of the town below. A fierce debate ensued, resulting in most of the people voting to head back down, leaving only a fraction of us who decided to stay. I was the only non-government person staying up, which confirmed my opinion. They were looking as worried as I was. One, despite noticing the disturbing silence, decided to go back down. "I'll just head over to City Hall, see what's happening and sort things out," he claimed, noticing my fear. "Just a 5-minute trip. I'll be back up in a jiffy." I begged him not to, but he persisted, even though he looked anxious himself. "The City Hall is right across the square. What could go wrong?" he reassured himself, straightening his black tie that nestled over his scruffy dress shirt. Then, he and 10 of the 20 other people on the roof went back down the stairs and into the interior of the apartment building. We never saw them again. We watched them descend into the darkness, disappearing into the gloom, hoping, praying that they would come back soon, joking how it was a false alarm and teasing us about being cowards. About a minute in though, a sickening, nauseating stench began to waft back up the staircase, filling my nostrils with the putrid scent of decay. A bomb of dread erupted in my stomach as I collapsed, retching up my stomach's contents onto the concrete roof. I knew this smell. It was as familiar to me as the building I stood on. It was the stench of freshly dead, decomposing bodies. Being a doctor in a poor, filthy small city, I was all too familiar with this smell. I had smelled it countless times, with countless bodies. It was unmistakable. Yet, Bodies don't begin to smell like this until they've been decomposed for several days. Even if they all had just died, how would they smell like this already? I decided not to dwell on the answer. After that, we stayed well away from the stairs, only moving close to close the door. Then, we simply sat down and waited. There was me, 4 men, 3 women, and 3 kids left. The siren continued to shriek, even as the day passed and night fell again. None of us slept that first night. I spent my time staring down at the ground below, wondering what sort of horrific substance lay down there. Very rarely, during the night, when the moonlight hit a certain angle just right, I could just barely, make out a faint hint of a greenish haze floating in mid-air, a mere 2 feet below the roof of our apartment. On the 3rd day, a similar stench of decay hit our noses, like bodies being dissolved in acid. It emanated from the entire town, wafting from invisible sources. We all spent our entire day gagging and vomiting over the edge. It still smells today, drifting up from below. It smells different now, like sulfur. Now, it's been a week since the tsunami hit my town. Me and 10 other people are the only survivors as of late. We've divided up what meager supplies we have, but it's not going to last all 10 of us long. I don't think we have much time. The warning siren, even after a week, is still going full force. We're all kind of used to the noise now. I have no idea how it's powered though, considering our electricity is completely down. Once my backup generator runs out, we'll be out of power permanently. I think about my family a lot now. I forgot them in the initial panic and regretted that decision ever since. I cling to the faintest of hopes that they're somehow safe and well, but that hope shrinks with each passing day. Even worse, I think whatever the tsunami washed in, it's beginning to rise. Judging from the gleams of the moonlight, it's only a foot away from the surface of our roof now.